Greetings, everyone. This is Presiding Bishop William Harris, and welcome to the 2021 International Christian Apostolic Fellowship Leadership Conference. We are here in the great city of Louisville, Kentucky, at the Marriott East Hotel. What a wonderful time we've been having as we have been lifting up the mighty and wonderful name of Jesus. We're broadcasting today literally around the world through various social media platforms. And we are excited that you have joined us. And we are excited for those that will be joining us in this virtual platform panel discussion. It is a blessing, again, to be here, and it is a blessing to be able to greet you and to have you be a part of this session. I have been blessed and favored of the Lord to not just have a virtual audience, but we literally have an in-person audience of pastors and leaders from around the United States that drove in town to be a part of this special meeting. So we are actually virtual, but we also have an in-person delegation that's here with us, and I'm certainly thankful. I want to honor the bishops that are here with us this weekend, as well as the pastors and first ladies and workers that are working behind the scenes to make this conference a great success. And so again, welcome to the conference, and also thank you for joining us today for this great panel discussion. The thesis of this conference is strategic leadership in uncertain times. Strategic leadership in uncertain times. And I think all of us can admit and understand that we're living in uncertain times. Today, leadership may often feel like being the captain of a sailing ship in a heavy thunderstorm. While you're keeping the ship above water, you're struggling to keep sometimes your own orientation, and you don't know what would happen next, the next day, the next moment, or even the next minute. Without question, we're living in a period of great uncertainty, and I want you to underline that word uncertainty in your minds. It is often said, but is no less true, that the context within which organizations and churches operate today is changing at an unprecedented rate. Things are shifting, things are changing, things are evolving. In a world that is characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, even ambiguity, we can question whether the idea of strategy as we have known it is even still valid after all under such challenging conditions. It is far from obvious that long-term plans and maybe even objectives and systematic analysis, do they really even still serve their original purpose? Uncertainty has been underlined by many of our speakers this weekend, but it refers to the extent to which we can confidently predict the future. Part of uncertainty is perceived and associated with our inability to understand what is truly going on. I think a lot of pastors and leaders around the country over the last year probably prayed, Lord, what is truly going on? We often feel uncertain when things are out of our control or too hard for us to grasp, both physically, mentally, and I would say even today spiritually, specifically with the COVID-19 international pandemic. If uncertainty is the new norm, then it's ever more important that leaders think and act strategically. The more strategic leaders become, the more confident they will be in the choices and the actions that they take. So it is my vision today for our pastors and along with pastors that will be joining us, and I was notified today that we will even be having some of our international pastors join us and some of our pastors throughout the United States, and even some of our guest delegates that will be a part of this session. I think that everyone wants to know what are some of the actions we can take. What can we do to navigate through the pandemic. So today we're going to have a discussion. And the thesis today is strategic leadership in uncertain times. We have today three distinguished panelists that will be taking on three different subjects. And the subjects that they're going to take on today is strategic ways to lead this millennial generation, strategic ways for pastors and leaders to build new streams of income, and lastly, strategic ways to pastor in this pandemic. For those of you in the room, would you help me and greet them by clapping our hands and just welcoming them to the International Christian Apostolic Fellowship. Thank you so much. It is a blessing, again, to have each one of them. I'm going to introduce each one. We're going to spend about 20, 25 minutes with each one, and then we're going to ask them to hold, and then we're going to bring all of our panelists back at the end. We're going to do a question and answer session. So if you're online, you have any questions you would like to ask them, you can put it in the comment section. If you're in the room, here in the ballroom, and if you have any questions, feel free to write it down and give it to one of our hosts, and they'll be glad to give it to me at the time of our Q&A session. Our first panelist is Evangelist Frida Morrison, who recently broke the glass ceiling as the first president of the International Young People's Union of the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World. As a licensed evangelist with the PAFW, Frida has traveled across the world evangelizing, preaching the gospel in various countries, including Canada, Mexico, Europe, Asia, Central America. Frida resides in Philadelphia with her husband, Derek Morrison. She will be speaking on the subject of strategic ways to lead this millennial generation. I thought she would be a great panelist since she's now the National Youth President of the PFW. And we are certainly excited, Evangelist Morrison, to have you be with us for the first time here at the ICAF. So first, let me say welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Bishop Harris. I'm certainly honored to be with you today, and I'm certainly looking forward to receiving also and hearing the great information and the word that we're going to receive with all of our panelists today. So again, thank you.
Absolutely. And again, we appreciate you for accepting the invitation to come. And I believe that you will be able to, from your perspective, shed some light. Here at the ICF, we're always having think tanks or panel discussions to better educate and to better form strategic thinking within our leaders and within our churches internationally. I've got some questions I want to ask you, and I'll do that later. But first, I want to let you open up your subject. Maybe the Lord has put something on your heart for your topic or any of your prepared notes on strategic ways pastors can lead millennials in the current climate that we're in. So I'm going to first just give you a few minutes here to just speak from what the Lord has given to you. And then after that, I'll come back and ask you a few questions. So I'll give you the floor. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you for this opportunity to share with the ICAF. As it was stated earlier, my name is Evangelist Frida Morrison, and I currently serve as president of the International Pentecostal Young People's Union of the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World. I have been given the task to talk about strategic ways to lead the millennial generation. The first thought that comes to my mind in dealing with this specific topic is making sure that we are correctly identifying the group that we are trying to work with. Because from my observation, many people in the older generation consider anybody that's young a millennial. But the very first thing that I want to make sure that we are very clear on is that millennials at this point are now hitting the age of 40. They're now hitting the age of 40. And so millennials are getting older. Many of them are parents. Some of them are even grandparents at this moment. They pay taxes. They have mortgages. And so they are aging out of what we typically consider to be young people. The generation that is under the millennials are probably what most people are thinking of when they are thinking about working with young people, and that is the Generation Z. And then under Generation Z, the generation after that that's up and coming is Generation Alpha. Just to give you some sort of date range, millennials are typically those that are born between the early 80s up until 1996, and then Generation Z are those that are born after 1997 up until about 2009. And then Generation Alpha is the year 2010 and behind. There's also a micro generation. These are your individuals that were born in the late 70s, like 1977, 1978, all the way up to 1983, and they're called the Xennials. And so you have very different classifications. Each group has their own distinct characteristics, and they all cannot, you really can't group everybody into one group. They all have very specific needs. Their outlooks are very different, very different. Each one has their own distinct way of learning and absorbing information. And so, again, to set the foundation, I think it's very important that you first identify when you're talking about developing a strategy, keeping in mind that a strategy is simply a plan of action to achieve a specific goal. And so, if your goal is to minister or develop programming for young people, then it's very important that you first identify exactly who it is that you want to speak to. So, since the topic is about millennials, then I'm going to base it on the fact that we are specifically talking about those individuals that were born before 1996. I see Bishop coming on the screen. Is there something that you wanted to jump in on?
I know, I think it's really important, imperative and important that you noted just the identification of the groups, because I believe that you're right. Pastors in many cases group everybody in their church as a millennial. So everybody now that looks young or is considered to be in the youth department is a millennial. And I think that that's so important, because sometimes in the church, we have what we call vision and we have strategies, but we have not made the right identification. And if you don't have the right identification and you have a vision for a group that's really not in an age group or in the same frame of thought as the vision, and many times we're missing it, not because we don't have a vision, but many times we have not identified the people that should populate the vision. And so our execution points are very much off. So I think that's really a great point to start for all of our pastors, to make sure that we identify, and a lot of pastors use the word millennials. If we're using that word millennial, let's make sure that we're identifying in our congregation that group. In order to put a vision there, then we need to make sure that we first have identified them, and then after we identify them, then we can execute more effectively within our own vision. So I think that's a really, really great starting point. You may continue.
Yes. So when we're talking about developing strategy, particularly within the church, another thing that I've observed is you'll hear people um, say things such as, well, we don't need to plan. All we need to do is give them Jesus. Just give them Jesus, and everything is going to be okay. And we understand that Jesus is everything that we need. However, I believe that in order for us to be impactful with what we're trying to do in the kingdom, and we're trying to build the kingdom and building our communities and building our churches, we need to have a strategy that allows people to get to Jesus. And so, one of the things that came to my mind in my community about 4 years ago, we received our very first Chick-fil-A. And when Chick-fil-A opened up, there's a nice little shopping area that's in my community. And in uh, this shopping area, there's also another very well-known, established, nationally known fried chicken brand that was also in this same shopping center. Both of these entities served fried chicken. Both of these entities served what I consider good fried chicken. However, today, the other entity closed down. They're out of business because Chick-fil-A pretty much took away all of their business. Oftentimes, and the reason I brought this up is because of this. A lot of times people say things such as, Jesus is all we need. Again, I understand that concept. Jesus is definitely all we need. But the reason why the other brand did not make it was not because of the food. They served good food. The food is good, but it had nothing to do with the food. And the reason why a lot of our ministries are failing is not because of the message. It's not because people don't want to know about Jesus, but it comes down to three things that I have identified. Number one, presentation. Number two, delivery. And number three, experience. When people go to Chick-fil-A, they don't mind waiting in line. At our Chick-fil-A, the lines literally wrap around the building, both when we had in-person service as well as in the drive-through. And people do not mind waiting in line because they enjoy the presentation, they enjoy the delivery, and they always have a good experience. Even though the other restaurant had a shorter line, even though the other restaurant also provide good food, at the end of the day, the presentation, the delivery, and the experience was the main strategy that caused them to excel above the other restaurant. When it comes to ministry, we can take that same principle, particularly when it comes to finding a strategy that can help us build the millennial and under generation in our churches. We must address our presentation, we must address how we deliver, and we also want to make sure that the overall experience is good. What I've come to learn is that both presentation and delivery, presentation plus delivery, will always equal a good experience. And when you put that all together, then you'll find a way, you'll find something in that will allow you to literally lead not just the millennial generation, but Generation Z and Generation Alpha that's coming up behind them. Now, when we talk about, again, the millennial generation and the generations that's under them, when you're trying to find that strategy, we already know that presentation, delivery, and experience is important when it comes to our strategy. We already talked about identifying our target. Once you identify your target, you know exactly who you want to speak to. You know what that generation is and what that generation is about. Then you need to communicate with them and find out what their needs are. Don't try to dictate to them what you think their needs are, because your experience is your reality, but it may not be their reality. The only way that you'll be able to develop a strategy that will work for your ministry and that will work for your community is to actually sit down, have a conversation, develop a relationship so that you can find out what their specific needs are. You don't want to waste time on something that may make you feel good, but at the end of the day, does not benefit your target audience. And once you find out what the needs are, then and as you're communicating with them and you find out what the needs are, then another thing that's going to be very important is that you understand the language. Understand the language. I'm not speaking about slang terms of the generation, although that is important to know so that you don't sound silly when you're speaking to them. But it's important to understand words that resonate with them. There are some things that may mean something great to baby boomers that have the complete opposite meaning to someone that was born in 2010 or 2015 or the year 2000. So it's very important that you understand the language so that when you're communicating to them and you're trying to find out what the needs are, you're also able to dictate back, or not, excuse me, not dictate, but respond to them in a way that they'll be able to grasp and understand as well. So learning the language, communicating, and then lastly, you want to be able to empower them. One of the greatest things that I experienced during this pandemic is that the pandemic literally forced leadership to allow both millennials and Generation Z church members to take control and lead, because they were the ones that were more versed in technological advancements. They were the ones that understood how to put together a virtual service. They were the ones that understood how to speak the virtual language. They were the ones that understood how to utilize Facebook and how to utilize Instagram and how to, they were well versed in the language. And there were some ministries that didn't know what to do, but they had to turn to Generation Z. They had to turn to the millennials in order for them to keep the church going. And so this pandemic, although as Bishop Harris has stated, this is definitely an unprecedented time. It has also exposed and allowed millennials as well as Generation Z church members to be utilized and to be pushed in the forefront of the church, because they are very well versed in how to, or they were very well versed in how to keep things going during the lockdown. And so when we talk about strategy or strategic ways to lead the millennial generation, again, presentation, delivery, and experience. And then when it comes to defining and fine tuning what that strategy is going to be, it's making sure that we identify our target, communicate with them effectively, learn their language, empower them, and allow them to go forth and to be great in kingdom. I'll stop there for now.
Well, that was awesome. And I think that the message that you've given to the pastors is very, very thought-provoking. I was talking actually to some millennials after service last night. I was sitting in the lobby and was talking to a young lady. And I said, well, we're having a panel tomorrow, and I gave her the thesis. And I said, if you had a question or comment, what would it be centered around? And we got into a somewhat of a deep conversation. And she said something that was important. She said, Bishop, you know, I've been in church all of my life. But she said, sometimes the church is actually answering questions that nobody's asking anymore. And I sat there and I began to really think about it, because I think sometimes we as pastors and leaders, and you don't have to even be an older pastor to get caught up into this. Sometimes we can get caught up into what we know, into our own experience. And through our preaching, through our presentation, we can be preaching and answering questions that they're not even asking. And so it seems like in many cases, and not in all churches, sometimes if a pastor is not really relevant, we could actually see a disconnect in certain groups in our church, specifically the millennials and even groups outside of the millennial group. So I think it's important that we try to focus our pastors' strategy on making sure that if we're answering questions, we're answering the right question for the right generation. I hope y'all got that. Making sure that our vision is focused to the right generation in the right season. And I hate to say this, but being a fourth generation apostolic, and I was saved at 4 years old. I'm a pew baby. Had a chance to grow up through the different stages of being a young man and then moving into leadership in the Lord's church. One thing that I found out is that at many stages, because of my rearing and me being brought up in the church, I learned to adapt to different cultures, not because I was taught. We didn't have a choice. And so those that came up in my generation, whether they were asking or answering any type of question, we didn't get a chance to even ask why we did it. We didn't get a chance to raise our hand and say, can you explain to us? We somewhat did it out of reverence. Let me go respect. And then if I could be really transparent, fear, because Even if we didn't understand it, we didn't have a choice. I remember my father told me one day, well, if you don't want to do it, you're going to get out of my house. You know, we were raised up in a more of a strict type of environment. Now, young people today, specifically millennials, they don't mind raising their hand in Bible study and asking you why. They don't mind challenging the status quo. And I think that this subject is very, very important for our pastors, and the information evangelists that you've given to us is very, very important. And I believe it's well received. I was going to ask you a question concerning the differences between the millennial generation and generations before, as it pertains to ministry and being in the position that you're in. And I'm sure in your international department, the PFW, you have people of all different ages that occupy that set group. What have you found to be the differences between maybe the millennial generation and the generations that are older? What have you ran into as even a youth president that is distinct differences between the generations?
Well, the most, I would say the most common difference or the biggest difference is the fact that the millennial generation is digital native. So they are the ones who they did not have an analog experience. So they absorb information quite differently than the previous generation. They were born in the information age. So um, older generations, in from my observation, seem to be more comfortable when someone, and let's say for this example, a pastor, someone that's preaching, they seem to be more open to receiving what the pastor says. The pastor said so, I'm just going to receive it and go with it. Millennials, because of the fact that they are digital native, they have access, they were born in the information age, they look up everything. Google is right next to the Bible. So they look up everything. And so you just can't say anything without any backing. They're going to look up everything. They're not the because I said so generation. Maybe the previous generations were okay with that when it comes to leadership um, in the church. But the millennials, you cannot just say anything. You have to back it up. You have to show them book, chapter, and verse. So that they'll be able to grasp it and understand it. Also, they're very visual. They're very visual. So, because the millennial generation, as well as Generation Z, are much more visual, they absorb information differently. Um, they're not as comfortable and not as open in receiving information in a lecture type setting for a long period of time, because studies have even shown, because of the fact that we are always in front of a screen, our attention span is much shorter. And so 2 3 hour sermons won't work for that generation and below. What you're seeing now, which I find very interesting, is, most churches understand that because millennials and under absorb information that's visual better. You see churches and ministries have televisions and projectors in the sanctuary. Now, 60 years ago, you had churches, you had pastors that preached against television in the home. But now you have churches with televisions and screens in the sanctuary. So those saints, 60, 70 years ago that used to preach against what they called the one-eyed devil, they would be turning in their graves now to know that now, you have to have media in the sanctuary so that everybody can absorb the information. Everybody benefits from it, whether you're a baby boomer to Generation Alpha. We all benefit from it, but there's a purpose behind that. And the purpose behind that is because of the fact that millennials and under, they just absorb information differently. And so when it comes to ministry, the differences, how they absorb information has forced us to change how we deliver that information. As they say, and I know it's become a bit of a cliche, but it's very true. The message is the same, but the method has to change according to the time.
Absolutely. I wanted to take a minute. I'm asking another question to speak to the pastors that are here in the ballroom, as well as those that are online. And I wrote a book a few years ago called Leadership. And the thesis of that book is that it's going to take a different kind of pastor and leader to lead in this generation. And that pastors have to evolve and we have to move. We can't be static. We can't stay still. We can't just do what our forefathers taught us. The message is the same, but our methodology must change. We must shift, and not just shift in the style of our preaching. We have to shift in the way we think, in our approach to ministry, as well as in our approach to people and how we deal with people. We used to build churches on this iconic one-man system, where there was this one person and that charismatic personality would just draw people to the church. They were almost untouchable. You couldn't really shake their hand, and they were known for maybe the gifts and the miracles, and all that is still needed for today. But in order for us to be effective today, we're going to have an evolving approach. We're going to have an ability to touch people, a charisma to be able to allow millennials and young people to be able to understand that you understand. And I tell older pastors, you don't have to be a millennial pastor to be effective with the millennials, but you got to really have an open mind to be able to make adjustments in order to touch them and minister to them and be open to some new ways and new ideas and new ideologies that they would present to the kingdom of God. Now, the church sometimes, and I take a lot of slack for making a lot of these statements, but the church sometimes, we're the last ones to change. We're the last ones to evolve. Of course, I live in California now. If you go into Silicon Valley, you will find that a lot of the companies start really early recruiting millennials. My son is at St. Mary's University there, and as a freshman, they're in that college. They're recruiting them as freshmen to move into their companies, giving them internships early in the process. In other words, they are engaging that culture and early on, because they understand in order for their businesses to evolve and to grow, that age group is an important age group to their success. I would just submit to the pastors that we need to take on some of that same approach. We shouldn't wait until that young man or that young lady turns 40 to 50 to start using them in the church. We've got to find a way to involve them now. I believe that Evangelist Morrison had made a statement that COVID caused us to have to bridge certain generations to come together and begin to work. I have older members of my church that never went on Facebook, did not have a Facebook account. When we had to go live, we actually had to have classes. And even this weekend, as an illustration, my son was in college, so he stayed home. My father-in-law is in his 70s. He wanted to be, and he's online now, he wanted to be a part of the conference. My son had to go to his house, a millennial, had to go to his house, had to set it up on his Facebook, and if he couldn't get it on Facebook, to his YouTube account, right? Never had these accounts before, but to see my son and my father-in-law working together to get connected to the conference is a signal to what we're saying today. It has caused two generations, maybe more, to have to work together. And I believe that this is going to hopefully even evolve into greater relationships between the multiple generations that have even been affected through this pandemic. Here's another question. What adjustments do you think churches will have to make to effectively minister to the millennial generation? What can we do? If you're just speaking to pastors now, what do you feel like pastors can do even now to be more effective at ministering to the millennial generation?
Well, so I already talked about the technology side of stuff. So definitely you want to address that. If your church doesn't have digital footprint, and here's, I'll say this real quick. you have to understand that, again, millennials and under are digital native. That means that this is the basis of how they live. This is the basis of their lifestyle. If your church does not have a digital footprint, meaning if you don't have a Facebook page, you don't have a, a website, you don't have any type of presence online, what you need to understand is that that translates as a ministry or something that a millennial and under can't trust. If when someone says back in the day, hey, I'll look you up in the yellow pages, it's kind of like that. If I don't see if the older generation, if you didn't see it, a business in the yellow pages, you probably thought, okay, it doesn't exist. It's not real. Well, it's the same way for millennials and under. If you don't have a digital footprint, they typically don't see you as a legit ministry, so they'll pass you over in most cases. So I talked about the technical stuff already, but that I just wanted to make that point. The other thing that I want to mention is you want to make sure that in identifying each generation, you have millennials, generation Z, generation alpha, each one has their own distinct characteristics that's unique to them. When it comes to millennials, millennials are very civic minded. They are a very civic minded generation. So when you're talking about strategy, you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, that you have events, programming that's very civic minded, meaning things that touch the community, things that are more than just being within the four walls of the church. Millennials respond very well to civic minded ministries. They want to make sure that they're doing something that has an impact on the world and has an impact on the community. So that's something that's very important. When it comes to Generation Z, again, these are your young people that were born after 1996. Their generation is, again, when it comes to the technical side of things, they're completely different. They have jobs, and they have the type of jobs that many, even millennials and above, don't have. They're going to have jobs that don't even exist right now. This is the generation that's going to be working in areas of AI, artificial intelligence, and things of that nature. And so when it comes to ministry for them, you have to be very forward thinking, because they're going to be doing things and understanding things that you have never experienced before. And so again, we're talking about strategy. We're talking about making sure that you are in a very strategic place so that you can be effective with whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish when it comes to ministering to that particular generation.
Absolutely. Evangelist Morrison, I want you to just hold for a second. We have, and I was watching the online comments, we have a lot of millennials on, and they have some questions for you. We're going to compile those questions, and I'm going to come back to you in just a few minutes after introducing a few panelists, and we're going to ask you some additional questions because I believe that pastors as well as the millennials would like to engage in a little deeper conversation. So we'll come back to you in just a few seconds. Can you all give her one hand really quick? Again, thank you so much for what you have contributed to our discussion. I'm going to introduce our second panelist. It's Suffragan Bishop Michael E. Ford Jr. Received his formal education from Sullivan University. He's also a President's Cup recipient, which is Sullivan University's highest honor. Suffragan Bishop Ford was a professional firefighter for 23 years, earned multiple promotions, ascending to the high rank of Lieutenant Colonel and the position of Assistant Chief of the Louisville Fire Department. Assistant Chief Ford is an international speaker, excelling in the subjects of organizational leadership, people and community building, and youth empowerment. I would like for our virtual in-person audience to help us welcome him. He's also now the senior pastor of Christ Temple Apostolic Church here in the city of Louisville, Kentucky, after succeeding his great father, the Bishop Michael Ford, the former assistant presiding bishop of the Pentecostal churches of the Apostolic faith. So can you all give him a real big hand praise and a great big God bless you? Certainly, Bishop Ford, we are thankful to have you. Good to see you again and have you be a part. So welcome first to the ICAF.
Well, Bishop, certainly I'm grateful to be here. It's good to see you. I am extremely honored. How can I have been invited to come and be with the dynamic, my brother, my friend, Presiding Bishop Harris. And so I'm just excited about being here at the Midwinter Conference. Yeah, so I'm excited to be here. I can't wait to get engaged in this conversation.
Absolutely. I thought about you in reviewing our thesis for the year, and I know a little more than maybe some pastors in our movement about your past and also what you're currently doing through some of your Master's Building Academy and the work that you're doing there in helping people build in different areas. And I thought about churches that are emerging from COVID. I thought about the challenges they're going to face, the challenges that pastors are going to face, particularly financial challenges. And many pastors, and we dealt with this in our bishop board meeting, will no longer be able to just solely depend upon tithes and offerings, will not solely be able to depend upon the traditional framework of the financial structure of churches. And so today, I wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about ways in which pastors can come up with new strategies, maybe for income or strategies for new streams of income or different ways in which we could maybe not continue just to build on our traditional format. Now, again, COVID has introduced the pandemic, which we all know has been negative to many, but it has also produced a climate and culture to have conversations that the church probably should have been having anyway. And so I think that even with this whole new technical thing, the church probably should have already been engaged in these things. And so COVID made us do things that maybe we were slowful in doing. And now we're going to be faced with churches that cannot reopen. People have lost buildings. People are probably going to lose members and tithing that they previously depended upon. So I really want you to maybe just open up for a few minutes as we've done with our first panelists and kind of just share some things maybe the Lord has given to you, and then I'll come back as with the other guests and ask you a few questions. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bishop. You hit it on the nail. All right. We are in a transition moment, and it's a moment for us to consider some things that we probably should have considered a long time ago. But this pandemic, I've been telling people say it's the devil. And if it is the devil, I'm saying it's the devil that God is using because he's given us an opportunity to shift out of some things that we probably should have shifted out of a long time ago. And before we talk about streams of income, one of the things you mentioned it earlier, our mindsets and our methods of things that we've been doing in the past, we really need to reconsider those things. And so one of the things that, I was thinking about in terms of how do we shift the saints as pastors, as leaders, as the church, how do we equip the saints? Well, first of all, I think we need to reevaluate the messages that we have been preaching. I think we need to reevaluate some of the things that we love so much, the theatrical things that we just enjoy. We call it the gravy. We need to reevaluate some of those things because in many cases, the things that we say have not been accurate. In some cases, they've been disingenuous, and in other cases, they've just been, flat out incomplete. And what I mean by that, I mean, when we talk about, we tell the people of God, we've been doing this a long time, and we tell the people of God, listen, give $100 and turn around 7 times, and my God, you're going to get a new house, a new car. Listen, you're going to get money coming, right? We've been saying this a long time, but if we would be honest, that is where it may have some merit. It's an incomplete strategy for teaching the people of God how to manage their money, how to build wealth. And so we've modeled an incomplete statement. The second thing I'll say is, when it comes to, we've been experts in teaching the saints about sowing and reaping, seed time and harvest. My God, we done spent some time teaching them that concept, but it's been based only in terms of giving offering. And again, it's an incomplete strategy for teaching the saints how to grow, how to become kingdom givers, kingdom entrepreneurs. Listen, we tell the saints, listen, you the head and not the tail, right? You the lender and not the borrower. I mean, you're the lender and not the borrower. But we know that ain't true. In most cases, we are the tail. In most cases, we are the lender, right? We are the borrower, right? So, I think that's where we have to begin to change our strategy and what we are modeling, in terms of how we're dealing with the saints. If we're going to get to the place where the saints grow, well, we need to begin to teach them, okay, yes, it's seed time and harvest. Yes, it's sowing and reaping. But listen, how about teaching them sowing and investing in the stock market, sowing and investing in real estate, sowing and investing, reaping dividends, cash flow, passive income, right? Sowing into your own personal development. We've only taught a small segment of what sowing and reaping actually means. And so therefore, the harvest that we've been getting back has been an incomplete harvest. The saints should have a bigger, more massive, more complete harvest, but we haven't modeled the right things in front of them. We haven't taught them a complete thing. So the third thing I would say is, for pastors, as we move forward, as in the church and leadership, as we think about moving the saints and moving the church into this I say new kingdom, but it's not new. It's really an old model, but we've just forgotten that model. And so we need to begin to teach the people. First of all, we need to learn it ourselves. We need to learn about financial literacy. We need to listen. We do a lot of stuff that has affected not only the people in a bad way, but even the finances of the church have not been what they could have been, because we ourselves didn't understand investment. We was in a meeting, we talked about investing in our church at Christ Temple. And, one of the concerns is, well, ain't that stuff risky? Isn't investing risky? Listen, what's risky is being broke, right? If the pandemic didn't teach us anything, it should have taught us, if you have one stream of income, you have made a major mistake in your life, right? Because thank God I have, me and my wife, we have a number of businesses, and one of our businesses was supposed to be coming into 2020 in a very strong position, our first year of profitability for that business. Well, that business got hit with COVID, right? And so that business went from getting ready to be profits to we was in trouble with it, right? But the bottom line is, thank God we had multiple streams of income that helped to steady that ship. So what I want to say is, if we as the church are really going to grow, really going to take the people of God to the next level, we have to readjust the messaging that we're giving and the modeling that we're giving. Yes, we want them to give offering, but let's tell the whole council, all right, after you give this $100, after you give this $1,000, now you need to enroll in this class that's going to teach you how to do money. All right. Anyway, Bishop, I'll stop right there.
No, you are so much on it. I just thought about something you said. You said a lot, but one thing that really stuck out to me was that the people have a partial harvest. They have an incomplete harvest because they've only sold into one stream. They've only sold into one area, and they may get some return, but that return is so small because they've only returned in one area or sold into one area. And so I think this discussion is very relevant. And I had a chance to just peek on some of the comments One brother said, I gave my 100 and turned around a few times, and I'm still looking for the blessing. And I thought that was quite interesting. They are corresponding with you now and really enjoying the comments that you made. I think this brother is actually from Jamaica. And I wanted just to share with you and the audience the need for these discussions. I talked to a bishop in the hallway and said, Bishop Harris, why are you always wanting a panel, or we want to have some church? I said, man, we've had enough shouting. Then we've had enough praise break. Then people praise break and broke. I think they shout so much because they know when they go home, they don't have no money to pay the rent. And they're hoping while they're shouting that the rent check don't get there.
That's right.
It comes a time where that's all good. I love shouting and the preaching and, like you said, the gravy. I'm into all that. But I'm also into a place of understanding, as one of the younger bishops in the Lord's church, that our generation of pastors will not sustain even the former vision of our ministries if the people are not blessed. I believe that the people need to be blessed in order to bless the church. That's what I believe. And I believe that I'm taking a lot of hits for this. I really believe that churches must do what we're doing now. Stop a lot of the antics, stop a lot of the spiritual quote things that we say, and sit down with our members and say, yes, we would like for you to give a seed or pay your tithes, but I also need you to understand how to budget, how to manage your money, how to go into the, like you said, the most risky thing is to stay broke, to go learn how to invest your money or to start a business. Pastors, watch this. Don't get afraid of this conversation. Don't freeze up, because if we can get your people blessed, your income in your church is going to increase. So spend time invested in your people. And if you do that, then those people will now have funds to invest back into your ministry. I hope I'm on the right page with you and you all understand what I'm saying. All right, Bishop Ford, here's a question for you, and I know you have a lot more you can add to the discussion. And I want to move because I know they have a lot of questions for you as well. Why do you feel pastors are afraid to step out of the box and create a framework of business or multiple streams of income? What do you think the fear is?
Well, and for lack of a better word, let me just say, I'm gonna call it ignorance, and I don't think it's because I don't think it's malicious, right? Sometimes I can tell you about real estate, so I stay in the corner that I understand. I can teach you this word, I know this Bible, right? So I stay in that framework without actually taking the time to go and learn and invest in yourself. Listen, we'll go to a seminar class that will teach us how to exegete these scriptures. We'll go to we'll pay these universities to pay us big money to go and learn how to be a better pastor in this way or that way. But what about actually taking some time? At Master Builders Academy, one of the things we talk about as we build people's entrepreneur thought and their investing thought, this information is completely free, right? This information, we call it YouTube University. I hope somebody will write it down. Write down my university. My university, I know Bishop talked about Southern University. No, that was years ago. My new university that I still attend is YouTube University. It's free. Tuition is free. You can get on there and learn anything you want to know, and then you can be able to come and explain it. Bishop, we started a thing with our young people where we taught investing. They was in Master Builders Academy, and we taught them investing. So now we have their own investment group. Bishop, they killing me. They killing me. They hit me with some stock yesterday and was like, yeah, you sold too quick, Pastor. This thing is going off the charts. I'm like, man, oh, God. But what I'm saying is it may be the fact that we are nervous. We are scared. We're scared. We're afraid of what we haven't ourselves learned. But I'm telling you, this is the time to be very open and go and learn the thing that you don't know about, but you know you need to know about.
Absolutely. And I would say to pastors as well, don't be afraid of bringing people in that can help you. Don't be afraid if you don't know something. It is so important to be connected to people who can introduce you and your people to different ideas or thoughts. And I think one of the greatest leaders, or I should say the best leaders in the world, are people that are just not the smartest people, but people who know how to connect with the right people. And whatever you don't know, get some people around you that can undergird you and can share with you and can really, really help you. You said something, Bishop Ford, that I told our Bishop Ford the other day. Listen, I said, you guys already know about faith. You guys know the word of God. We know about the oneness, whatever the doctrinal teachings. Listen, you guys got that. When we come to conventions, we shouldn't just spend all of our time talking about things that we already understand.
Yeah.
And it's so boring to me to go into conventions and we're talking about the same thing.
Right.
Moving emotion over and over and over again. When our people are dying, our churches need roofs, they need buildings, the pastors are struggling to pay their registration because the members have not even given to the fact that the pastor can be a blessing. Some pastors barely make it to the convention, and they spend almost all the money that they should probably be investing trying to make it to the convention. And there comes a time where if we have a heart for our pastors, a heart for our churches, we want them. The pastor should not be the only one driving a Mercedes. The pastor should not be the only one that can afford a tailored suit. I was with Bishop Jakes a couple of years ago at his leadership conference. It was a private conversation that occurred that changed me. We were standing there, and another pastor came up, and his armor bearer was with Bishop Jakes, which I'm familiar with, and they were just talking, and they asked the armor bearer, said, "Hey, where did you get that suit from?" And this was like eye-opening. He looked at Bishop Jakes first, and Jakes just nodded his head. He said, "From the same place Bishop Jakes got his suit made." And Jakes said, "Ask him where he's got his car from." And he said, "Well, my Bentley was from the same parking lot." And so everybody in the room, they got their attention. But you know what Bishop Jakes was trying to tell people? He's not the only one blessed in his system, but he's got people around him that are just as blessed as he is, simply because of what he has given to them. Now, this is going to change somebody's theology. Some of you have sons and daughters, but they only look like you in the spirit. But they don't look like you in the flesh. Y'all missed what I said. They got your DNA as far as speaking in tongues loud, but they don't have the DNA of your finances or your financial planning. And I'm trying my best, at least in the circle that I'm in, and that's why I brought these guests for my pastors. I can't speak today to other organizations to say, hey, let's not just invest spiritually with our sons and daughters or our members. Let's go home and come up with an idea in which we can start investing in them physically and even financially. And don't be afraid to get out of the box, because maybe God had me tell y'all this, it's going to bless you. All I can tell you is if your members get blessed, they're going to bless you. If your church gets blessed, your payroll's going up. If somebody in your business, church starts a business, that's an additional income that's coming into your church. But I wanted to just take a moment, whether you're online or in the room, encourage any pastor leader to get out of the box. Don't be afraid. Lose your fear. Step out. Go to YouTube University. Bring in somebody that can come. My secretary just reminded me I've got a class that I'm doing, a master's class in the month of May, I think 11, on just creating streams of income for pastors, teaching you how to do it. I'm not even charging for it. I just wanted to invest in some of our leaders to let you know that there are new ways of business, and you cannot just get up there and raffle every Sunday. $100. Can I get $50? Can I get $30? Can I get $10? I mean, you want to get to a place where your member is blessed. And I want to say something. I'm going off the rail. I'm coming back, Mr. Ford, I promise you. I'm coming back. I just want to say one other thing. And to me, this is very, very, very important. Never fear the unknown. Never feel, and I know when we say stocks and y'all are using the Ponzi schemes and all these crazy, I'm not letting nobody come in my church. Don't let everybody come in your church, number one. But find people you can trust. And if you can do that, I believe that if you open your minds to new ideas, God is going to give you new streams of income. And in return, I think it's going to be a big blessing to you.
Bishop.
Yes, sir.
Bishop, I want to say this too. This is where pastors and leaders really have to be real careful. because this thing of modeling is so important. So most of our church members believe that you rich, okay? And they believe you rich not because you have, done these principles. They believe you're rich because they gave you some money. And when we have nice vehicles, or we have nice clothes, or we have these nice things, but we didn't teach them behind the scenes how we did get them. Like, they think that the reason why you have it, not because you was a businessman, not because you took care of these, you understood these principles. They believe that you're that way because you're rich. That's why so many people want to be preachers. I want to be pastor too. Pastor guy, he got a nice car. He got a sweet vehicle, right? But they don't. So that's where we haven't modeled and told them, listen, here are the business principles that I have employed in my own life that now will be a help and a blessing to your life. And that's the part we got to be careful and get right.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. Let me ask you a quick question, then I'm going to bring you back in just a few minutes. But can you answer this last question to just start the process thinking? And if you're online, this conversation is so critical. So I need you to share. I need y'all to start tagging people, saying, look, you need to get on, because there's some information that's being presented that can change your ministry, that can change your life. So those that are online, please share this broadcast. Can you just start this dialogue about how can a pastor start the process of maybe creating some new streams? I mean, for someone that's not deep into it, do you have any strategies of where they can start?
So I'm gonna hit you with a spiritual concept first, and that is, anytime I'm thinking about what I'm gonna do next, I start with prayer. And I think what we have failed to do, and what I don't know if we've done very well, is when we go to God and believe Him for more than just the tithe and the offering, to say that, Lord, I know your well is so deep that you have ideas and you have strategies and you have open doors and you have connections and you have collaborations, things that are available to me that I have never tapped into before. And when we go before God and believe Him for those things and begin to ask Him, Lord, send this my way. Lord, open up my understanding. Lord, give me, connect me with the right person. I think what you'll find is God will speak to you. I can give you story after story, but I'll just tell you, I was running the youth ministry at Christ Temple. And as I was running the youth ministry, y'all remember, we used to sell, how we make our money? We fried chicken, right? We sold candy bars. Come on, somebody. I know I'm telling the truth. We sold T-shirts. We did a car wash. We'd be out there for 8 hours doing a car wash with 30 people, and we make $100. Come on now. Like we were not doing it right. We wasn't actually utilizing the right principles. But I remember I went to God and said, Lord, I don't want to sell no more fish. I don't want to cook no more chicken. I don't want to do no more candy bars. Lord, I know that there are real strategies, there are real opportunities. Would you connect me with the right people? Would you show me the right thing? And I'll never forget, one morning the Lord told me, He said, go to this amusement park. It was Kentucky Kingdom. And Bishop knows it well. I've seen him there before, ride the roller coaster. And but I go there and I tell this lady, I meet with the lady, said the managers, they said, you have an appointment with her? I said, yeah. And then I didn't technically have it. I had it because God made the appointment. That was the stuff that I used for it. And but I get in there and I tell the lady, I said, listen, I said, you're supposed to give me some money. God sent me for you to give me some money. And this lady said, you're crazy. She started laughing at you. Crazy. I ain't got no money for you. But I pressed her so hard about it. I said, she finally looked and she was like, she said, well, she said, I don't have no money. She said, all I got is we would get ready to announce this opportunity. And this opportunity is for people to come to send people here. They work and we give the organization money. I said, that's it. People I have, money I don't have. So what we did was that year we sent our young people to work there. That summer, we made almost $15,000 for youth ministry that was averaging $500. Why? I can give you time after time that I went before God and God showed me. I can tell you all these different things and streams that we can get in, but I want to tell you the first thing is go to God and be open to what He'll tell you. Thank you, Bishop.
Absolutely. Let's give Bishop Ford a great hand. Bishop, we're coming right back to you. How many of you are enjoying this panel so far? This is some awesome information. And we'll come back. If you have questions for our two first panelists, please write them down. We're going to get right back to them. We have our third and final panelist, Bishop Joel Trout, who has actively been engaged in ministry for over 40 years. His fivefold ministry gift as apostle, his emphasis is on equipping leaders through innovative approaches. He leads ICAF Global Leadership Group. Bishop Trout, thank you for coming. Some of you that are online, I'm sure you know him, and he's no stranger to our organization. I've had him in several times training our leaders. Always been amazed at his ability to articulate leadership in a way that people can literally understand and literally apply to their ministries and to their lives. Bishop, thank you, first of all, for being with us today.
Bishop Harris, it's once again good to see you. We've been together in different stations and points in life for probably the last, 25, 30 years. It seems like there's always something that we've been able to merge our efforts in, and it's always exciting to be with you once again. Here we are, you almost 50 and I'm 59, so
that's right.
A lot's happened over the years.
That's right. You reminded me that I've got a birthday next week, and I will be officially old starting on next week, right?
Yes, sir.
My old man's card, all right? But by the time you all see me next year, I'll be all black. I'm going young by next convention. Bishop Trout is correct. Me and Bishop Trout has been working together, even in organizations of my previous history, and then throughout the works that he's done and has pastored some very great and magnificent ministries. And I knew that he would be able to give us a word. I'm really a little different than most people when I do a conference. I don't really bring people in, not because of just what I would consider to be popular or have a big name. I'm more interested in the message. I'm more interested in content. I'm more interested in quality of what a person would say, because I want the people that I serve to receive the best information that will cause them to be successful. Bishop Trout, you've pastored for many years, and you pastored somewhat as a young man, and now somewhat as an older man. I won't call you old, just an older man. So I know you've been able to kind of bridge the different age groups. You pastored from Georgia in the South down to the West Coast and San Diego, so you know that the cultural differences. Pastoring a multicultural church is way different than pastoring a church in the South, vice versa. And your travels have given you a lot of insight to how we can work in this pandemic. Bishop Trout, his subject is strategic ways to pastor in the pandemic. And with the pandemic hitting us, I'm sure pastors are in this room right now and also online. They're very interested in your comments concerning what God has given to you concerning pastoring in this current era. So I want to give you the floor and let you speak to the pastors concerning pastoring in the pandemic.
So it's important to understand history to really understand where we are today. We're living at the bend of the arc of history. So there's not many generations that get to see an actual change in how history is going. There's an arc, and then there are times when there's a bend. And when the bend occurs, that means there's a total change in the way things are done or the message that is spoken. So living in the pandemic, you can't look at it just from an isolated point of view as a pandemic. But what we have to recognize is there's a change in society that also has affected us. It's called the zeitgeist. And the zeitgeist means the trend of the age. So if you look at the bend of the arc of history, significant things that happened in the church, for example, AD 33, the message changed. When Jesus brought the disciples together in the Acts, the 2nd chapter, the church was birthed, and now we have the birth of the church itself. We go forward 300 AD, the Catholic Church rises, and there's a change in the message. And that is the Pope now has the power to forgive sins. Move up 1617, Luther says, wait a minute. No, the just shall live by faith. Change in the message. Azusa, 1906, change in the message. In the last days, I'll pour out my spirit upon all flesh. 2020, change in the delivery system, not the message. The delivery system changed. So we were shocked and awed at first, and now that we've gathered ourselves, we need to understand what changed, and that is delivery systems. You see, prior to 2020, the signs were there. And as you've heard before, many times the church is the last one to get it because we're so stuck. You know, right now we're in a cycle of a 100-year liturgical model. We have the same church worship model for 100 years. What do you mean? Go around the country Sunday morning at a certain time. You know that majority of churches are doing the same thing. So what happened last year? Delivery system changed. What was leading up to that to give us indication? You ever heard of Uber? You ever heard of Lyft? You ever heard of Amazon? Instacart? You know what those were telling us? That the world, the trend of the age was we're willing to accept things that we used to get a different way. So that was already in the ether, was that we were already preparing for a new delivery system. What happens in 2020? A change in the way we deliver our goods and services. And that was already in the atmosphere. We just didn't catch it. So pastoring in the pandemic was a complete shuffle for many. Some churches did not survive it because they had a very touchy, kinetic experience, tactile church experience. In other words, their whole draw was when you come to our building, you're going to have this wonderful, engaging, uplifting, narcotic effect in our church. So it's a 3-hour thing. Those churches did not make it well in the pandemic because everything was built on your engagement in a service with us. And our charismatic leader was everything. And I know it's because I've seen those churches. There were other churches that were already in position. So it wasn't a pivot for them. It was just progress. You know, some people had to make a pivot. Others just sped up their progress because they had already decentralized the leadership, and they had already positioned themselves to be able to offer an experience beyond just the building. And so pastoring in the pandemic, I believe, was God's way of resetting everyone. I mean, from mega to minor. You know, when I saw Noel Jones doing Bible study out of his living room and hearing his dog barking in the background, I knew we were in a whole new place. You know, like Dorothy told Toto, this ain't Kansas. So that's where we are now. So now it's understanding how pastors are to operate in this pandemic.
Absolutely. Bishop, such dynamic thoughts and approach. Tell me, how do you really feel like pastoring has changed? Give me some ways in which pastoring has changed from pre-COVID to now. Somewhat, I guess we're in the middle to the end of COVID, but how has it changed since COVID has begun?
So pastors prior to COVID pretty much had their whatever their system is, their system was set up, and they were accustomed to operating in their system. And Sunday mornings, you give your great message. You either meet folks at the altar, you stand at the door, shake their hands, go to your office, get your report, how much money we got. And so we were locked in. What has changed is this. One of the major changes is that pastors have had to become producers, directors, set designers, audio technicians, and script writers, which most were not strong at all. That was a whole different skill set, but many have been called upon to do that. And so what happened was we started seeing these efforts coming out early on, and it was laughable. It was funny. There's this one pastor who they repeated it went viral because he's sitting there trying to preach, and the kids was hollering in the background, and he's trying to preach, "Shut up, y'all, be quiet." And he tried to get back to his message. And so pastoring is different now because you're called upon, watch this, not to necessarily do your in-church pastoring, but now to produce something. And that was not in the skill set of most pastors. And then not to have their services, then it put many pastors in a place of loss. What do I do now? Because guess what? There was a loss of interest in many ministries because he wasn't surrounded by his package. You know, many preachers, they are a result of their packaging. But take away the packaging, the stage, the robe, come on here, the clerical collar, the chain, the choir in the background, the organ, and you find out, oh my God, he was just a creation. But when it came down to just raw, sitting in front of a camera without audience response, it revealed what was lacking. So pastoring now is totally different because the packaging has been taken away.
Absolutely. And another way to say that, a lot of pastors, they look better than they sounded. And there was no substance. And they had to now begin to teach, preach, like you said, looking at a camera, a red dot, nobody saying amen, nobody clapping. They couldn't receive the emotionalism that usually comes from our experiences. Maybe the B3, they had a hoop trigger maybe in the background, and maybe their wife talk about, go ahead, baby, and preach, and took them out of their zone. I think the first 30 days was hilarious to me. I was online. People called up after a while, and you could tell people got better at it. But when it first happened, if you were not already set up for this, it was really interesting. There's a good thing there that pastors had to change. They had to evolve to even keep a sense of ministry around them. There's a second question I wrote down. These are just my personal questions right now. And it was, what do you think pastors can expect when they come back out of the pandemic? When pastors go back and the city, the government, the health department, the CDC says, okay, hey guys, we can open 100%, we're back in church. What do you think we can expect when we go back into the church?
Well, you can expect things not to be as you hope them to be or want them to be. Mm-hmm. You see, the generation that we were trained for doesn't even exist anymore.
That's right.
And then you throw in this twist that people have had a year to not go to church, and they woke up and found out, wow, I'm still saved. What a dangerous revelation to find out that I didn't have to go to church to be saved. You're in trouble now. I'm gonna tell you something. Experiencing Sunday morning without the pressure, it was eye-opening, because I was used to driving to church on Sunday and looking at folks jogging and all that. Look at those folks. That's an ungodly heathen. And guess what I am? An ungodly heathen. I'm telling you, to go back, church, now is this. If you're going to survive, you're going to have hybrid church.
Yeah.
Once again, the world informs us. Guess what the world did prior to this time? They came up with hybrid vehicles. You could put gas in it or it could run on electricity. You see what I mean? The world seems to be always leading us in the direction we should go. So if you're not positioned for hybrid church, then you're once again going to be lost in the shuffle. Hybrid meaning your virtual presence still has to be strong. For those brave enough to come out, you're also going to have to deliver for them, but you won't necessarily deliver the way you used to deliver. So even with that, the coming back model needs to understand your people. You know, you used to tell folk, don't be visiting church when we have in church. Well, they've been doing that all year. And their eyes have been opened. So a pastor, really, if a church grows, you know what happens? The pastor grows.
Yes.
The pastor becomes much more secure in himself and his identity. So he realizes, I don't have to be the best preacher in my church.
Right.
That's not that. I just have to pastor these people. So coming back, every pastor should have a strong understanding of the bicycle spoke. And the bicycle spoke, or the bicycle wheel, is simply this. There's a hub and then there's spokes. And so church now is going to look like this. The hub, meaning the church service, may be a once a week, once a month experience together, but we have strong spokes throughout the community that connects us to our church. It's actually going back to the future. Back to the Future was the first church. They would go to the temple, but the strength of the church was in the homes. They were setting up in the homes all over the city. And maybe this is teaching us the church experience, the building experience. Number one, coming back, you're going to need to reassess, why are we paying all this money for this building that's not used during the week, but once a week? It may require us, I say, looking forward, to be more collaborative. Once again, the world is teaching us this. Watch this. Restaurants shut down this past year. They couldn't make it. So you know what has come back? They're called ghost kitchens. And a ghost kitchen is simply this. Remember, the delivery system has changed, so people are used to getting their food delivered. Right. So there are warehouses that house 10, 15 restaurants, and people are getting their food delivered from all types of restaurants in this one warehouse. But it saves on overhead, saves on employee costs. Why? Because we're sharing. I saw here in town, Applebee's had another restaurant inside Applebee's that was a chicken wing place. But watch this. There's no chicken wing sign outside of Applebee's. Right. But people were ordering, didn't know where it was coming from, but it was a ghost kitchen operating in their kitchen.
Yes.
Well, guess what happened? It saved everybody money.
Right.
I'm seeing this. The church, to survive, is going to have to be collaborative if they want to keep the same building model, the same overhead building. You're going to have to be more collaborative, sharing space, understanding that the building is not going to be what it used to be. You know, we went almost every day of the week. Our choirs have learned how to operate. Our praise teams have figured out how to do all their practices and rehearsals virtually. and do a virtual presentation, get all their singing done on Friday, record it, and play it on Sunday, you think they all gonna come back to that old work schedule that they used to have? No. So you're gonna have to incorporate the best of meeting with the best of virtual. Hybrid church, I think, is coming back, is what we're going to have to prepare for.
Absolutely. Come on, give Bishop Trout a big hand. What a word. I'm going to do something, and I want the team to bring everybody back. We're going to bring all of our panelists back. And as the panelists are coming back, I have a list of questions here that many online have asked, and maybe in the room, if you have any questions in the room, if you would just write them down or tweet or text one of the staff, and we'll make sure that we present these questions to the panelists. Bishop Trout, we're going to come right back to you real quick. The first question is for Bishop Trout, and that question was, what effect has the pandemic had on the mental health of pastors? Have you had any experience with that, and what do you think this pandemic has had on the mental health of pastors?
That is so important. Pastors have gone through much more than what people even realize, because our identity many times is tied to the pulpit, and the high of the quick response being lost, and then not having certainty, church shut down outside of your power and control. The mental health has really suffered for pastors. If pastors were leaving the profession before COVID, the only thing that kept them from leaving was there was nowhere to go last year. So they were just stuck like Chuck, but it already left the house. So I think there's something else that has come to play, and that is this more openness to therapy and treatment. It's no longer considered verboten for pastors, especially in our apostolicity, to receive therapy and counseling. So there are so many ways in which our mental health has suffered, and it's not going to return back to what it was. So I think right now the thing should be pastors seeking therapy, seeking assistance, and so that they can talk these things out and realize their value is not tied to the structure that used to exist.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. I pray that any pastor that's either here or viewing online, I hope that you understand that it is okay for a pastor to hurt. I hope you understand that it is okay for a pastor to suffer attacks even from Satan, as well as attacks on your mind. Bishop Child made it very plain, because of our traditions and culture, we were told that if we had any type of challenges in our mind or thoughts that were probably not what the scripture stated they should be, it couldn't even be a sin. It means that we are really moving out of the course of God. I think that this generation of leaders must protect the mental health of pastors. And if I can add something, even the first families. And sometimes I believe the first families are the least ministered to segment of the body of Christ, because I don't think it's just the pastor. Because if the pastor is suffering, then his wife is probably also having some effect of that suffering, which in return his kids may also have some effect of that as well. And so I wanted to really make sure that we, that our pastors, know that if you are having issues, get some help and connect with somebody that's not going to judge you for what you are feeling or what you are going through. And then lastly, for those of you that are not pastors, but you are members of a church, pray for your leadership in this season. This has not been an easy season. I've seen a lot of people criticizing pastors online. If I was a bishop, I'd do this. If I was a pastor, I would go do that. And you don't know what you would do in the current era. None of us have ever pastored through a COVID experience, and this is new. And we need to really encourage our pastors, even those of you that are sitting in the pews or even at home. You want to encourage them because some pastors wanted to leave the church before the pandemic. And I'm sure that throughout the pandemic, some pastors have left the church, and some that haven't left the church probably thought about leaving the church. And if they get back to church with no encouragement, we may see an exit from the pulpit even post-COVID, depending upon how the situation works out. So I believe that the Spirit of God is saying that we should pray for leadership today. We've always done that, but I believe you should pray for them today like you've never prayed for your leadership before, because we want the Lord to cover them. Evangelist Frida Morrison, here's a question from you from online. Presentation plus delivery plus experience equals great results. How do we as the millennial generation influence our pastors to use the equation that you presented?
Well, I think it's very important, number one, and this is something that I share with many millennials and under. It's very important that you have a relationship with your pastor. If you have a relationship with your pastor, it's going to be easier rather, to share information. One thing I've observed is that a lot of times I've heard people criticize their ministry, their local ministry. The pastor should do this, the pastor should do that. And they have great ideas, but part of the reason why those ideas may not be accepted is because they haven't developed a strong enough relationship with their pastor, enough for the pastor to trust them. And it's a two-way street, because there's another way to look at it as well. But if you truly have a heart for the ministry, and you truly desire to see your ministry thrive and to see the church grow, then it's important that you have your leaders' trust. And if you have your leaders' trust, I believe that when you go to your pastor and you share the ideas that you have to help improve the presentation, the delivery, and the experience, then your pastor, if they're a good leader and a good shepherd, I believe that they'll be open to receiving those suggestions and those ideas to help improve the ministry.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I believe pastors, I watched some of the heads of the pastors in the room as you've been talking, now their heads in agreement. And for any millennials, and we have a lot of questions for millennials. That means that we have millennials listening. I would suggest to all millennials that are watching, and Evangelist Morrison is giving you great wisdom, build relationships with the pastors that you want to see changes made in. I believe that's always been an issue. I used to be a national youth president and also youth pastor. And I've noted that in order to get the ball moving in an organization and or in a local church, you had to win the trust of those that was leading. Because there's so many young people that have come through that had great ideas and failed and wasn't trustworthy and caused so many issues. So when you come, you're not the first one that came with an idea. And so I believe if you build the trust, get a relationship with your leader, that they know that your heart is right. You're not doing it for self-glory or self-elevation. You're doing it for the kingdom of God. I don't know any pastor who wouldn't receive good information that would bless his church and would not go with the program if they believed that it was going to work, if it was going to prosper. And I think that comes from having a relationship with leadership. So all millennials, if God has graced you with ideas, graced you with the ability and the gift, not just start by building the program at the church. Start by building a relationship with the pastor, and that will probably lead to you being more effective as you move forward. So thank you so much. Bishop Ward, there's a question here. How do you balance church ministry with a business culture? How does a pastor balance being a businessman and being a spiritual leader? How does he make that balance?
That's a good one. That's a good one. I think when we get to a place where we are investing in people, because I'm a big believer in, and you mentioned it earlier, Bishop, not trying to do it yourself all the time, but really working on building a team for the things that you're doing. I remember we started Master Builders Academy, our entrepreneurship, professional development organization. And I remember gathering a team. And initially, I felt like, man, I was doing a lot of work to make the thing go. But after you pour into people and you give them an opportunity to grow, then what you'll find is you can pull your hand off of it a little bit and then allow them to run it and run with the ball. And sometimes what you'll find is they'll do it better than you was doing. And so I think that's part of the thing that we have to get to the place where we're really investing in our people. And I'll say this too, Bishop. You know, all the things that Bishop Trout was mentioning and Evangelist is mentioning, we need to invest in ourselves. We need to invest in the saints, not just the Word of God. We know that but there are principles of development, right? And when we start working toward developing our way, you know, yes, our young people, they'll come to us with a lot of ideas. Then they might fail, but our responsibility as leaders is to keep pulling them in, show them how to work through their failures, show them how to work through their shortcomings, you know, give them the tools that they need so that they can move from failure to these successes, because it's not just their success that's on the line, it's all of our success that's on the line.
I agree with you 100%. And I think it's very, very important to collaborate. I think even Bishop Trout has said that about collaboration. You know, the problem with, and we're speaking specifically to leaders and pastors, and I know this is a Pentecostal apostolic circle that we're talking to, and I have the chance to train in front of different religious and non-religious leaders. One of the things I want to share to a Pentecostal apostolic audience that is quite different than other audiences that I train with, we have a competition type culture that's maybe hidden in a way, where we were trained not to trust people. So collaboration in the Pentecostal Apostolic Church sometimes, not all the time, is limited because our forefathers told us don't trust another man in your house, or don't bring in a consultant. If God don't give it to you, you're just not going to get it. Well, the truth of the matter is all of us don't have gifts in every area. And so the fivefold ministry, the body of Christ, is built so that we could collaborate, that we could touch. So there won't be needs in our house, but there's going to be needs in your house if you don't have the gift to meet that need. And so collaboration is going to be more needed now than ever before. And that's collaborating in finding people that can be a blessing to you. Collaborating with not just outside forces, but inside forces. A lot of things that I've done in the new shift of our ministry was to really bring people into a leadership. Now, those that study leadership, remember, this is not a new theory, but many books years ago was written about that emerging leadership group, or that evolving leadership, that there are people in the pews that are going to evolve. I would honestly say, and Evangelist Morrison said that, even with the pandemic, some of us, whether we wanted to or not, was forced to use people that we might not have normally used in the church. And the people that used to be in front of the camera or on the front row wasn't even in church. I remember going in church for my first 60 days in California. We were completely shut down, and seeing the same 3 or 4 people every Sunday for 5 or 6 Sundays. And the people that I was talking to were the people that I normally wouldn't even have an experience with on another normal Sunday, because by the time I get there, and I would have a normal offer bearers meeting, greeting people walking down the hallway. You know, you get in your office, and, you know, pastors have a routine. You come out, do your thing. The young ladies that were greeting me were usually people that didn't even get a chance to speak to me. And I'm in the hallway saying, hey, and I never forget, and I won't mention the names because I think they're online. I called them by some nicknames, and this young lady said, I'm going to call their names Kiki and KK. They are twins in my church. And they said, Bishop, do you really know our full names? And I did, but I had to actually stop. And it took me a few minutes to get it. I played it off, so I'll get back to you. I went to rush. I went to the office, and I got in there, and I said, you know, that's bad. But I was forced now to acknowledge a reality that probably before I would have never even had to have a conversation. Just in passing, like, praise the Lord, you know how we do. Hey, Kiki, hey, and you call people's names. But they were working now that they never had to work. They were probably on the back row of the church. But now they're running the cameras. They are now running the media system. They're now on the global media team, and they're probably 16, 17 years old in the church. And so I had to make adjustments to collaborate now with kids or children in my church that I probably never had a strong relationship with otherwise. I think collaboration is not just outside of our church, bringing people in inside our church that probably were sitting in the pews, but probably have ideas, and that includes youth, that includes millennials, that includes other professionals in our church that can quite be a blessing to us. Evangelist Morrison, another question: how can we explain the need for a shift in communication between the millennials and leadership? And they're speaking of that communication gap. How can we explain how pastors and millennials can communicate? I would maybe add, because that's kind of a clouded question, I would maybe add something to that. You said earlier something about understanding pastors, understanding the language of millennials. Talk about that barrier there and what the need is for us to bring clarity to.
Yeah, well, you said actually the right word, barrier, language barriers. We have to be very careful while we're trying to find strategies or build strategies to build our ministries, particularly when it comes to millennials and generations under, to make sure that, as I stated earlier, that we understand the language. As I stated earlier also, millennials and under are digital native. So there are terms, there are concepts, even culturally speaking, that they get very quickly, that maybe older generations do not get or may not be able to receive. And because of that, when you're speaking to them, when you're presenting to them, when you're trying to work on your delivery, even, you have to keep that in mind. One example that I'll give is, when it comes to when it comes to presentation, I stated earlier about having television screens in the ministry. How you organize the delivery of the word sometimes has to change. When you're talking to an older generation, maybe the ones that were born in the 60s and 70s, baby boomers, Generation X, there are some references that you may be able to use that everybody will get. Sometimes I laugh at my mother. My mother is my pastor, and she may pull a reference that we know nothing about, the younger generation. She may say something like, "Well, it's howdy doody time," and the older generation, they're like, they laughing, and the rest of us, we're like, howdy doody. We don't get it. And so this is why it's important that you understand the language, understand the references, understand how you can communicate things a little bit better, how you organize things a little bit better. I think it's important for pastors to learn things like PowerPoint, not to be intimidated by that. Even if you can't do it yourself, turn your notes over to someone who can set up a PowerPoint for you so that you can present the message in a way that everybody can understand. And what I've learned is that providing access to tools like something similar to PowerPoint has actually been a blessing to older generation populations when it comes to understanding the Word of God themselves. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Absolutely. And let me share this with everyone. There's a question here, but I think that I'd like to answer it. And if anyone wants to chime in on this, and it's a long question, but generally what it says is how do we bring all generations in the church together to begin to work together? And I think that from all the panelists, they kind of hit on the need for some type of collaboration. And I wanted just to give a suggestion to pastors that, we did this at our church. I think we took a whole week or weekend, or a couple of weekends, and we did a think tank with different segments of our church, different parts of our ministry, to really sit down at the table and actually talk. You would be surprised how much you can learn from people if you sit down with an open mind to just communicate and figure out. And pastors, do me a favor, sometimes sit down and open yourself up to a little criticism. And do things like, what did we do good here, or what did we do bad? And don't rebuke people when you hear something. Really do it to receive. And if you can't, some of us are built where you can't receive it. Well, give them a box to give a private, anonymous comment, right? You would be surprised to know what people in your church think you do well, and maybe what our church doesn't do as well. And learning to listen, everything you can apply, but hearing things to just know where our pulse of our church is, listening to be able to bring ideas and thoughts together. Because if you want to minister strategically and more effectively, you really need to know where to start so that you can now start working towards some end goals and end games. Now, let me say this, and I know we're running out of time, and my staff wants to keep me on schedule tonight. We've got a long evening ahead of us. I want to do something. First, I want to thank the panelists first, because you guys have all been great, and it fits within the vision of what we are doing. I am more into this, everybody that knows me know that, than I am into an evening service and preaching, and I do all that as well. I'm more into dialogue, and sometimes we never have enough time. So we're going to pick up another part of this even at a later time. But I want to give the panelists an opportunity. And those that are online, if you're enjoying the panelists, I want you to let them know by leaving comments. If this panel has given you some information and some resources that you can use, and it has been a blessing for my request, would you now go to the comment section? They'll get to see this later if they can't see it now, and maybe leave some comments and let them know how they have been a blessing unto you. And if this is the first time that you have seen them, and I know some of them are the first time in our organization, please reach out to them if their ministry can be a blessing unto you. I want to do some closing statements. I didn't prepare them for this, but it just came to me. And I will go in the order that we opened. I will go to Evangelist Peter Morrison, and then I will go to Bishop Michael Ford, and then we'll end with the Bishop Joel Trout. And maybe 5 minutes or so, whenever you have an open mic, you're going to be talking to all the bishops here. I wish you could see them in the ballroom, and then you're going to be speaking to all of the pastors and young people that are online. Take about 5 minutes and just wrap up your session. Anything you want to say, anything that could be a blessing to us, and then we'll do a wrap-up session and we'll be dismissed. We'll go with Evangelist Frida Morrison. Again, on my behalf, Evangelist, thank you for joining me today.
Oops. All right, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to share with you all today. I was certainly blessed by everything that I heard, and I hope that you were blessed by what I was able to share with you today. In closing, what I'd like to say is going back to the analogy that I shared with you all earlier about Chick-fil-A and how the presentation, delivery, and experience, I believe, were part of their strategy, which allowed them to outdo another food chain that was also sold the same thing pretty much right next door to them, and how they were able to outlast and survive that particular food chain. In thinking about that, one of the things that I thought about, slightly related but also slightly different, is the brazen serpent that Moses made, that the Lord told Moses to make. And we all know the story, and the children of Israel, how they were, the Lord sent out poisonous snakes to bite them. It was part of their punishment for all of the mumbling and grumbling that they did. And he told Moses to create this serpent, this brazen serpent, that all they had to do was, when they were bitten by a snake, they looked at it and they lived. If they looked at it, they lived. We rejoice over that. It's a powerful story in the Bible. But hundreds of years later, I believe just about 400 years later, King Hezekiah destroyed that same brazen serpent. And I think it's very important for us to recognize that something may have been great and powerful, anointed even in its season, but times bring about change, and we cannot allow our ego to be married to methods just because the Lord did wondrous works through it in the 60s. It worked in the 70s. It may have even worked in the 80s, but we don't want to be stuck where God was. We want to make sure that we are always connected to where God is. And if you stay connected to where God is, then you will always find a way to find the strategy that you need to be successful in your leadership. And that's all I want to say today. Thank you so much.
Evangelist, let's give her a hand. Thank you, sincerely. And I pray that in the future we can make a different connection, another connection, and serve together again as well. I'm going to go to my second point, but in between this statement, I did not make this announcement, but some have just ended up texting me. If you would like to sow to this panel, I always say if you grow, you sow. Everybody say if you grow, you sow. If some information has been given that calls you to grow, I want you to go to our Cash App, $ICAF1. They'll put it in the comment section, $ICAF1. I want everyone to go take a seed. We're going to be a blessing to them, but I want you to go plant a seed into the information, the education, even the inspiration that you have received today on this panel. They didn't come demanding anything particular. We want to bless them, but I want you to be a blessing to them. Go so right now into this information that you received, and I believe that seed is going to produce a harvest for you as well. Again, Evangelist, thank you again so much, and it's my pleasure to have you on this platform. Bishop Michael Ford, we're going to give you a few minutes to do your closing remarks.
Well, first of all, thank you, Bishop, for inviting me, and certainly thank God to all of the bishops and pastors. And I've certainly enjoyed seeing and hearing Bishop Trout and Evangelist Morrison. One thing we were talking about multiple streams of income for the church, and I think somebody might want to mute their line. We're talking about multiple streams of income for the church. And one thing I want to just say to the pastors and all the leadership is, I could tell you a lot of different avenues. We could talk about real estate. We could talk about different businesses. We can talk about many online services that can bring income. But what I'd rather tell you is each person, each leader really needs to seek the Lord and really needs to be open to finding out what it is that God would have for them to do, because each ministry is so different. And so I want to hit you with this, and that is the Bible says that he says, my people fail because of a lack of knowledge. And I'm going to tell you something else. Not only do we fail because of a lack of knowledge, we're fearful because we lack knowledge. Right? There's a lot of stuff that we should go do. There's a lot of stuff that we should go after, but we're afraid to do it because we don't understand it. Right? And we have to be open to these new opportunities. There are so many different things that are out there for us. And God, the Bible says, he said, the wealth of the wicked is laid up for the righteous. But we got to be bold enough to go access that wealth. And as soon as we do it, we're going to find that God has already made provisions for us to get there. I'll say one story, Bishop. I was going after a business. It was a $500,000 business. Me and my wife couldn't even spell 500,000, right? And we were going after this business, and the guy, when I talked to him, he said, Michael, you really need to put a bid on the business. Well, I was afraid. I never had $500,000 before, so I was scared. So I told him, I said, wait, I got to go get finances. I got to get financing. And he said, Mike, people are going to come after this business. You need to put a bid on it. And I remember waiting strictly out of fear. And lo and behold, I went and I started inquiring about different businesses. Every door I went to, God opened up a new door. He opened up a new door. I had two banks fighting over giving me $500,000. So finally, I go back to the man. I said, I got the money. I'm ready. He said, Mike, we already gave the business to another guy. He said, I really wanted to give it to you. And I was like, it was a lesson that God taught me. If we're going to move in faith, move in faith. Stop being afraid. Listen, we can't be like the 10 spies. We know the promised land's over there, but we too scared of the giants that are over there. Let's move in faith. Let's go get the knowledge that we need, and let's look for God to open up massive doors for us. God bless you, Bishop. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bishop Ford, for being here. You are a blessing to us and a blessing to our organization. We wish you great success with the Masters Academy, and we pray that the Lord continue to bless you in your new position as senior pastor of the Christ Temple Apostolic Church. Bishop Joel Trout is going to come and give us our final words. Bishop, I think you are muted, if I'm correct.
How about that?
There we go. We got
Awesome, awesome. You see technology, how it do you? My God. I'm so glad to be a part of this panel, and it's an honor to be a part of this. Thank you, Bishop Harris. You know, we've been here before. In the book of Ezra, there's a scene in the 3rd chapter of Ezra where they had rebuilt the temple. The people had been dispersed, and they came back together and rebuilt the temple. And in the first service, there was a noise in the temple. And the noise was confusing because on one side, the old folks were crying because they remembered the former temple in its glory. But then there was another group that was rejoicing, and it was the young folks that didn't know about the old temple, but this was their first temple. And they were like, wow, this is the best thing since sliced bread. And so we've been here before. Yes. And we're at that stage where we're going to constantly hear how it used to be, how we used to have church. Oh my God, do you remember conventions? Yeah, we remember councils and conventions. But the young people are looking at our virtual contests and our virtual, like, wow, this is so cool. And so we're reliving that right now. So what I would say is this: 3 A's: accept, adapt, and act. The first A, accept that this is the reality. We can wish for what we used to have, but at this point, that horse has left the barn. Yes. Accept that this is it. You know, because many times we're trying to protect something that God has let go of himself. Do you know that God wasn't tripping because we didn't have Easter last year? Who knew? God wasn't even worried about us having an Easter service. Accept it. This is it. This is where we are now. Yes, we can talk about some of the wonderful things that used to happen, but don't get stuck there. Accept this is where we are. The next thing is adapt. All right, so how do we adapt to this reality and make it work for us? Because the same thing that takes some people under is going to make some people progress. We're not going to be the ones that get left behind. We're going to adapt. The dinosaurs died because they couldn't adapt to the radical temperature change. And we're going to be a footnote of history if we don't adapt. And finally, as Michael just said, act. We don't have time to test something out for 10 years, to do a beta test for 14 years. Many times we got to move now because things are changing so quickly. And finally, let's not miss this. It's still all about souls. Yes. Souls. Yes. We you know, sometimes we get so cute trying to accommodate this group and that group and that group, and we forget these folks got souls. Right. And we can't forget that right now, I believe we have an opportunity for our greatest harvest ever. With the backdrop of COVID and folks losing folks around them, don't you think hopelessness and despair are not key points for us to take advantage of and offer people a hope beyond this world? So in all of this, let's not forget that we are positioned for our greatest harvest of souls. God bless you.
Will you all in this ballroom and online give a great big hand praise? Come on, let's celebrate this dynamic panel and our guests. You've been awesome, and the words that you've given to us has given us education, inspiration, and strategy. We are thankful again for you and for all that came online with us today. I know people are working. This is a midday on a Friday. For you to come on and be a part of the panel and be a part of what we're doing, it has been awesome. This conference has been just a blessing already. From our executive cabinet meeting, Bishop Ward last night was awesome. The man of God had a write down word for us today. This morning, Bishop Ward preached a dynamic word, use both hands. I told him I'm going to steal it, use both hands. He actually got Bishop Trout just connected to some of the things from today. God is confirming his word. It has been a dynamic conference. Even being here is so different because we're used to seeing hundreds of people. We're used to, running into our friends and families in the lobby and hallways, and we're spaced out 6 feet apart with masks on, don't know who have. Somebody walking in, somebody the other day was waving at me. I couldn't get it until they put in there, I got you. It is a different culture, and for the fact that we're even here in a virtual format with just a few people broadcasting to the world shows you that we're living in a different era, a different time. But God has graced us to all be here, and we are so thankful for that. If you're still online, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. Our online audience has been awesome. I think last night, 3,500 people was with us on last night. It was awesome to have that many people around the country and world join our evening service. We'll see the numbers for today later, but we're thankful for each of you. If you would even see the rebroadcast at a later time and have the heart to sow, you can go back at that time and even sow, even at a later time, into the ICAF ministry. And again, the information is there on your screen or in the comment section. We're thankful again for each of you. Remember tonight at 7 p.m. we will be back for our evening service tonight. We have a dynamic speaker. I will be posting later. We'll also be broadcast on the Rhema television network tonight, going all around the world tonight into millions of people's homes tonight, starting at 7 o'clock p.m. We want you to join us virtually. All of the seats in the ballroom has already been reserved, so we can't invite you to come with us, but you can tap on virtually to be a part of the ICAF conference. If you need more information about the International Christian Apostolic Fellowship, you can go to www.icafglobal.com, and you can get all the information that you need concerning this great organization. We believe, God, that today's session has increased you and impacted you. Remember, we walk by faith and not by sight. God bless you and keep you in Jesus' name.